Hey guys, welcome to the conversation where we take everyday issues affecting college students and break them down for you to understand. Joining us today, we have Avni Jain, who has done her master's in economics from Delhi University and is also an economist and senior manager at HDFC Bank. Hi Avni, welcome to the show.
Hi, Hriday.
Today we're going to discuss a topic that affects almost all of us. They say that there are two things that are certain in life, which is death and taxes. However, in India, taxes are more like traffic lights. You're going to do it, but only if someone is going to catch you for it. I just wanted to ask you that what's the deal with the whole taxation system in India? And just if you could give us a background on it before we proceed to discuss the issues with it and how it could be improved.
So if you look at the taxes in particular, there are two types of taxes, broadly direct taxes and indirect taxes. The difference between two is direct, you can direct somebody tax directly. For example, income tax, you can come to me and tax my income directly, or you can go to a corporate and tax them directly. So that is one form of the tax. The other is indirect tax, which is mainly GST and excise duty and customs. So that is like it's a concept, it's divided in goods, and that is an indirect form because if you are as a consumer, if I'm consuming a product, I am paying an MRP and the tax will be consumed in that. So basically, these are major form of taxes which are there in India. Speaking about how the taxation system has been, one has to admire that, like if you see what is the breakup of India's Indian government's revenue, 70 to 80% comes from taxes alone. So there is a need to see how the taxation system has been, and in particular, because as an individual, I care about my like how much tax I am paying, how much is getting out of my pocket. So we need to look at the history, how the income tax has evolved over the time period. So in that context, and this is what we have, discussed also previously, that looking at the history, the taxation has been, at least on individuals, that you need to tax rich people more. So that is why, like until 1990s, the taxation for high growth individuals was quite high. And after 90s, with the reforms which kicked in LPG and the whole 91 structural reforms, there was a focus on how to reform taxation system as well. After that, income tax got slashed, and like there was a continuous effort to make the taxation system better. So this was more or less how the taxation system has evolved.
Okay, that's interesting. I think the point you mentioned about income taxes being extremely high before and them decreasing until now. So the thing is, when income taxes used to be high, I think the rate of tax evasion was also extremely high. But if you look at the tax system now, there are still about it's only 1% of the Indian population that pays direct taxes, and the government loses. I mean, that might be because of the fact that half of our Indian population is below the tax paying bracket. Like half of them earn below 5 lakhs, which is not taxed. But there is still a high rate of tax evasion that happens in our economy. So, do you think that it's just lowering the tax rate that helps decrease tax evasion, or should there be more serious regulation on taxes itself?
So I think the answer to that, I would want to break it into two parts. So, like if you remember, you're an economics student, you must have come across Laffer's curve. It's a U-shaped curve which shows the relationship between tax rate and tax revenue. So it's not that if you keep on increasing the tax, the government is going to earn a lot of tax revenue. You need to have an optimal tax rate, and the tax revenue also depends upon the tax buoyancy, which is a function of your growth. So it's not that you can just keep on increasing the tax rate and then the revenue is going to be higher. So that is one part of it. So in order to remove or reduce the evasion, firstly we need to increase the income of the people. So right now, what as you mentioned about the inequality and stuff, poor are poor, rich are rich, and it's just mostly salaried people who end up paying the tax. It's because their employer is cutting the tax. The people who are professionals or people who are who are working for their own, they end up finding the ways to reduce their tax liability. And that I think the problem of that lies in the structure of taxation. In the old regime, taxation is still there. If you look at it, after 5 lakhs, the income tax rate suddenly increases to 20%. So if I'm an individual, I would not want to, if I can, I would want to reduce that amount. So I think that somehow it brings in and kicks in the moral hazard problem. So we need to sort of, clean the tax slabs a bit and see the tax rates in order to motivate people to honestly pay taxes. First part is that, and second part is like I think in general there is a behavioral problem. People in India, because we don't have that strong public health or public education system, people like that is sort of loosely speaking. So people generally, perceive like, okay, I'm paying so much of tax, what I'm getting in return. So that sort of thinking need to be removed and need to be corrected. But okay, this needs to be highlighted. The government is coming up with so many institutions, so many healthcare programs, etc. So if you are paying taxes, the government is doing this much for you. So there are two places where I think the intervention needs to be done.
So, would you say that one aspect to what you mentioned, one thing that causes that would be the fact that the people who are paying the taxes and the people who are receiving the taxes are a little they're not exactly the same group of people. If you have the top 1% who are paying taxes, but if you have government healthcare programs and all maybe not directly benefiting them, do you think that it would be a little harder to get the rest of them to pay taxes if there is no direct incentive for them to do so?
Uh, like honestly, the answer is a little tricky because at the end of the day, everyone has different incentive. But what I feel is there is a general increase in income, like this is very growth related. Then at least like people would have that much of income which they can pay income tax. Like you have mentioned earlier, half of the people are below 5 lakhs limit, who is going to pay tax? So the first thing is that, and the second thing, like there is always going to be a mismatch between, the top percentile and the bottom percentile of the population. You can reduce the gap, but it's never going to be a Pareto optimal situation in which you cannot going to provide benefit to one person and without hurting the other person. So that the ideal situation is I think is never going to come in. Their economics teaches us about trade-offs. So you need to upset one set of people in order to benefit other. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's very true. And I've heard about this concept a lot in economics classes where they talk about trickle down economics, where inequality is not necessarily the worst thing because the bottom 28% probably still has a better life than the top 40%, say 50 years ago. So, keeping that in mind, do you think that the government shouldn't focus as much on higher taxes, higher like redistribution of income? And would you say that something like a flat tax would benefit our economy?
So I would want to highlight, like, if you compare the cross-country tax rates, at most of the cases, it's a progressive tax system only. The difference lies is how they have distributed that progressive system. For instance, in India, we have like what 0 and 0 to 5, then 20, then 30, and the surcharges, etc., etc. But in contrast, if you look at Singapore, I think their tax rate starts from 2%. From 2, it goes to 3.5, then 5, then 7, and like that it moves on. So if you have that kind of system, people are more motivated to pay taxes. So again, I would want to highlight this again, that firstly we need to clean up our tax slabs and adjust the tax slabs and tax rate, so that people are more incentivized to pay taxes. For example, if you're earning 15 lakhs and then you're paying 30% tax on 10 lakhs and then you're paying 30% tax on that, you are eventually losing out a lot of money. But but if you're earning 50 lakhs and then you are paying 30% tax on that, that is still somewhat, you will be somewhat okay with it. Okay, I'm a high worth individual, let me pay that much of tax. But if your worth is very less and you're paying so much tax on that, then you will, end up cribbing about it. So the first aspect is this. In terms of redistribution, so I was reading one RBI empirical studies paper. I would highly recommend if you're interested in knowing how the research has evolved and how the redistribution and fiscal policy has evolved in India since independence. So what it highlights that the taxation system in India has always been progressive. And in terms of redistribution, what I've observed that the focus has been to tax high worth people, that you're taking away money from them. So and then I like what I've read further, that in terms of reducing the inequality and in terms of making the distribution more equitable, it in comparison to higher taxes, if you go or take the path of transfers, it helps more and it's more what should I beneficial, and it's more beneficial. So I think rather than just taxing the people, the government should go take the path of should take the expenditure route.
Okay, so you're saying that compared to taxing the rich extra, they should focus more on spending money in the right way.
Right, right. On social, like the indulge into social expenditure, or like in programs like PM Awas Yojana, Manrega, these kind of programs.
So how effective do you think these programs have been in lifting, say, people out of the lower tax bracket, the no tax bracket, the ones that don't pay any tax, whitening the tax base? Do you think that's been effective in raising the general income levels of our country?
So if you look at Manrega, it's like a minimum job guarantee program. So in terms of that, I would say like why in terms of widening tax phases, it might have a second or third round impact, but I would say not the first round impact because it's a minimum job guarantee program. But I would say like it would have enabled, like if I'm a worker in compared to a situation where I'm earning zero, the Manrega would help me or my family to be more resourceful, and then perhaps my children would have been in a better position and did better. So that's the way I could think about it. But in terms of first round impact, I think like these programs would not have helped to increase the tax bracket in the first round person.
Okay, but it definitely helps in the long term.
Yeah.
And also, one thing that comes, one thing that you think of when you imagine government spending money, a lot of our countries' past has been plagued with corruption. And I think that's, at least personally for me, it's one big hindrance when it comes to paying taxes, because I just feel that the government's they're gonna use it for themselves, and it doesn't really make sense for me to pay any taxes. So, well, I mean, not me personally, but like just for people I know. So, do you think that reducing the amount of corruption would boost more citizens into paying taxes?
There is no right or wrong for this question. You know like government accounts and everything. If it's a corrupt government, it's a corrupt government. But whatever taxation policy they have, ultimately, like if the country is doing well, and that generally happens when policies are good and there are reforms, etc. Like if you see right after 2014, there was a flood of reforms in this sector, that sector, because we were stuck in a phase where we were not moving ahead. So that is if you connect corruption with how people pay taxes, yes, like if there is a faith in the policy and if there is a faith in government, I would say people would be more motivated to pay taxes. But if the faith in the government is less, there would be probably high chances of tax evasion.
Okay, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing I keep hearing a lot, one thing that even you mentioned is that the fact that we need to clean up our tax system. And apart from the tax slabs, I think I keep hearing a lot about loopholes and different how our tax code is so complicated. So what exactly are these issues with the tax system, and like how could they be solved?
So firstly, I think like in the older regime, as I told you, the difference between the tax slabs and what used to be the threshold, that is one huge difference. For example, if till today I'm earning 5 lakh rupees and suddenly I got an offer and today I suppose I live in Delhi and tomorrow I got an offer of 6 lakh rupees, which is in Pune. But because of my taxation changes, my incentive goes down because if from a calculated perspective, it won't make much sense for me to move out as my taxation liability will suddenly change so much. So that is one part again that you need to clean it up and define it more in a better manner. And also like make the so right now even if you look at the new regime, the tax rates are 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and then I think 30. So even if you then look at that, like uh, giving away taxing people who earn 15 lakh rupees at 30% is still very high. So redefinition of that is needed. And from the indirect tax perspective, I think there was a lot of confusion earlier because GST Council has revised rates quite a lot of times since when GST has come into play. So there was confusion regarding that at what rate, what is supposed to be taxed, etc., etc. So I think that is to a larger extent has resolved now. Now the issue is regarding if there should be GST on petrol and diesel and all, and because like from the industry perspective, it's a very very big issue. So that there is uncertainty when it can come to uh, under the GST regime, etc., etc. Apart from that, filing I think also is a very uh, cumbersome system which a lot of people keep complaining. So that's it. That's also there. Apart from that, I think the major issue about the taxation system was this double taxation problem that used to exist when VAT was there. So that is resolved from a for that is resolved after GST came into place. More or less, these are the problems which are there in our taxation system.
Okay, and how do you think that these problems can be solved? Is there any again coming back to the topic of a flat tax? I've heard that if you have two tax brackets, like I think the US had only two tax brackets at some point in the 80s. But what happens is when you do that, they keep expanding and they eventually break down and just become a whole mess all over again. So, is there any other solution to ending these loopholes and ending the bureaucracy in the tax rate? Because if you look at GST, also we've got like five GST brackets right now. I think it was reduced to three. So, could this all say come to an end if we have a single tax rate of 15% across the board?
So the problem with a proportional tax bill, the proportional tax, right, where you are charging everyone the same proportion of their income. So I would say like it will lead to more inequality. And since the focus of the government also always remains like if you keep on the focus of the government remains to lift the poor people out of their bottom bottom point quartile also. So the proportional tax would not make sense because at the end of the day, if I am paying more, then I can like afford to pay more tax also. But if I'm earning less and then I'm paying a whole lot of chunk as a tax, then my disposable income or the income which I am left with in order to spend will also go down. That will then have implications on your consumption, growth, everything. There's a whole connection. So that way, I would say the proportional tax system makes more sense. And when it comes to GST, I think it's already regressive because it's a consumption tax. So the essential goods, etc., are taxed lower, and the luxury goods they are taxed higher. So in terms of that, I think they can rationalize it more, and as you have mentioned that they can decrease the tax rates further. But I don't see a point of taxing everything even under GST or at a flat rate.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. But isn't it also true that if I am earning more money, wouldn't I be more likely to pay more in taxes anyways? If I'm making 50% of say 1 lakh rupees, or if I'm paying 15% of 5 lakh rupees, wouldn't I be paying more as a direct result of me making more income? So if we allow for a flat tax system, and we give the poor money back through deductions and certain other systems, wouldn't we effectively also be providing those with the taxes that are lower than their deductions with a certain level of guaranteed income? And technically, we also have a less complicated tax code, but we're also making sure that the poor of our country are taken care of.
I would say there would be administrative problems in that. If you remember, like earlier, we used to have like even periods as seen various phases. Earlier, it used to be universal, and it became targeted, etc., etc. So there definitely would be fiscal problems and the administrative problems regarding the same thing. In order to tackle what you are saying that the poor should have something minimum guarantees, I think government already have a lot of programs in place, like for minimum income they have Manrega, then they have Ujjwala program for cooking gas, and then they have food security program. So in order to have a bare minimum lifestyle or bare minimum necessities, the government already have some programs in place. So what like the suggestion that that you tax at a flat rate and then give back in transfers, I think there's going to be a leakage in that. And then again, rather of simplifying, it will make the problem more worse. Imagine like you are filing the tax and then then you are again asking for returns. It will make the problem even more complicated according to me.
Okay, so you think that this system would be more complicated than the system we currently do have regarding our taxes?
Yes.
Okay, that's one more issue that a lot of people face, where the difficulty of doing taxes, from it's quite, the whole system is quite difficult for most people. So do you think there's anything that the government could do to make that process easier when you're paying your taxes? Or is it just the people that should educate themselves better? Or like, whose responsibility should that be?
So I think first of all, what I feel in our education system besides CA program, I think BCom people or like BA people, none of us have had any kind of like how to do taxes as a part of our curriculum. So what I feel like there should be one necessary course where we know how these taxes are getting calculated and how we can file them. So once, like because everyone in a nation is at least a graduate, so if you have that in your curriculum, you have at least seen it, how it works. It sort of helps you in getting used to it and do it yourself. Introduction to how to do taxes and how taxation works, etc., etc. In our curriculum, and if possible, even in our school curriculum, apart from college, could be beneficial. Second thing, I feel that there should be some, the government could intervene at this point that in order to educate people about the taxation system and how it works and how the filing works, etc., etc., they can have some training programs. Right now, it's Corona time, so you cannot have it uh, in person, but they can have it on their websites and simple PDFs or simple training. So at least educated people and literate people in like These days, even rickshawalas have an Android smartphone. So educated people and people who are working, at least they would be aware like how to do their taxes, and they will not fear from it. So that's my two bits on this part.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, it was on our first episode of this podcast where we spoke about the education system, and we just discussed how our schools focus more about teaching us that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell compared to giving us actual financial education. And I think that's a great point that you mentioned about the fact that we should be given this kind of education from the early on. So, what other kind of changes would you think, as an economist, given the fact that we are taught science since third grade, but we aren't taught about, say, civics or how the government works uh, since very late into college. So, what changes do you think could be made to ensure that we could be given this kind of education at an early age?
I think firstly there needs to be a change in the mindset. Even people, even now, people who are opting humanities and arts, they are seen in a bad position or a bad light. For people who have done it, who are engineers or who are doctors, still if you go to like backward states, even now people consider those two options are the only occupation option. So I think firstly there is a need to change the mindset. Then secondly, in terms of school education, yes, science we learn from class 3 and civics from 7th, 8th or 9th, and then probably forget all about it once we enter college. So I think that is
Yeah.
something which needs to change. Like whatever basics we learn, like even whatever basics we learn in school, there is a need that those basics are carried forward in college. For example, I remember learning the whole preamble of India in class 9, and now I don't like. I
Yeah.
remember just 1 2 lines of preamble and nothing more. So like there is a huge disconnect. Like to even today, a lot of people are more aware that what Lok Sabha is, what Rajya Sabha is, how bills work, how bills are passed in the country, etc., etc. Although they learned about it directly or indirectly in their school, but because of the disconnect and then lack of interest, I think a lot of ignorance happens.
Yeah, that's very true, and I definitely feel that even someone like me, who is an economics major, who has a lot to do with economics, still has a lot to learn about our country's own tax system and how this works and all. So that's an amazing point, and I think that even for our listeners, if the rest of you guys want to learn more about how the tax system works and want to be given a guide on how to pay your taxes and all, do let us know in the comment section down below. This is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Avni, for joining us. This was amazing. I learned a lot. I hope our listeners did too. And thank you for joining us. And as always, the conversation starts here.